Hello, everybody. Welcome to an impromptu live conversation. Uh, Blake and I are here to discuss Picard Season 3, Episodes 1 through 3, just to kind of give a recap of where we're at. Maybe if folks are in the chat talking about what's upcoming, what some predictions people have are, and all that good stuff, and just kind of go from there. We're going to wait a few moments for people to potentially hop into the chat here. If you're in, say hello. If you're watching the video, put hello in the chat because I want to test something out. I got a new toy and I need somebody to type. Anybody. Good job, guys. Way to follow directions. I'm proud of you.
Very cool. Look at that snazzy new background we got there, Scott.
I know, it's moving and such.
Yeah.
I'm learning as I go. Well, Blake, we got a couple people watching. Let's just go ahead and keep chatting. And then, hey, Mega. Watch
Still
this,
don't
Mega.
hate it.
Are you ready, Mega? Boom. I still don't hate it. I have a new toy. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Howdy, Catherine.
Catherine's in the chat. Hello. Okay, Blake. How about you? Greg says season 3 is really good so far. Good job, Greg. So, Blake, how about you get us going? Just what do you want to talk about?
So, season 3 so far, I got to be honest. When you told me that you had the screeners and told me you wanted me to watch these, I think my first response to you was, unless they start out with, we fucked up, we fucked up, we know we fucked up, please accept our sincerest apologies. Thinking like a pre-credit scroll, kind of like Emissary did at the very start.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, just the scroll of, the we fucked up scroll. And your response to me was the very first second, you will not be disappointed.
Yes.
So, that was my going into this. I was highly skeptical. I was okay with season 1. Season 2, I really, the first episode and the last episode were fine and maybe 30 minutes out of the middle, but the rest of it I just couldn't stand. And this one, you were right. And it pains me to say that to you, Scott. It really does.
I know it makes you hurt, doesn't it?
It does. But we got started with it, and these first 3 episodes have just blown by. And it's been great to watch these characters who, frankly, you and I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? It was the 25th anniversary commercial I'm thinking of that they did in the lead up to Star Trek 6.
Yep,
And
Undiscovered Country.
You welcome them into your home for over 25 years, they've been your friends, your faithful companions, as it's the projected on the Enterprise as it goes. That just played in my mind watching the first part of this for the first time.
And you know who did the narration on that trailer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good old Christopher Plummer. The little fun fact about that trailer, because I am the keeper of useless bullshit knowledge, is Undiscovered Country was rushed into production. And the reason why that first trailer came out, the 25th anniversary, which I think is probably the best Trek movie trailer you've ever seen, and it has nothing from Undiscovered Country in it, is they released that in, I believe Undiscovered Country came out in December, and they released that trailer out in July, I think, of that year, and they had literally nothing in the can yet. And they're like, well, we got to do something. So let's go pull some TOS and movie stuff and just throw it on the Enterprise and call it a day. But it looks freaking fantastic. And let's get Christopher Plummer in the bathroom and have him record for us while we go.
Yep.
But yeah, to your point, I was feeling the same way. And folks in the chat, if you tell us how you felt going into Picard Season 3, we can chat with you about this as well, too. We want this to be a conversation tonight. But I was feeling the same way. Season 1, I watched it religiously, as I do all Trek for the most part. And I wasn't dissatisfied. I wasn't impressed either. I think what really turned me off was the darkness of it. And then, of course, the laziness of the production with like the copy and paste fleet and all that good stuff. But I mean, that scene with Data and Picard at the end is a marvelous scene because Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart know what they're doing. So, and it's kind of the same thing with season 2. You know, we've got, as we've discussed many times, the first episode's really good, which by the way was written by Terry Matalas. And the last episode's really good. And I still say that one of the best things that come out of of Trek in general is that interaction between Q and Picard at the end. And people have said that's out of character for Q. I disagree, but whatever. But yeah, to your point, when I popped that first screener on and started looking at it, and no one had told me anything, I just had it and decided to watch the first one. And it pops up within the 25th century. And then Stephen Barton's compositions start popping up. And it looked pretty too. It looked pretty. Yes, it's still a little dark. But already you could see just by the value of the production, it was better than where it started in terms of season 1, season 2. And it was very much a palate cleanser, which I think was the point. And hopefully we'll get Terry Matalas on soon to chat with us and maybe we can ask him this question. But I think that was his intent, was much as you said, hey, we fucked up, but we're back. Take a breath. It's going to be okay.
And you mentioned, the darkness part. And I think there's two aspects to that. One is the lighting and the production design. And we can get into that part. But the other part with the darkness you mentioned also has to do with some of the storylines. Now, I tend to like those stories a little bit. I mean, some of my favorite episodes of Star Trek are, Paradise Lost within Deep Space Nine, the Dominion War. I mean, Deep Space Nine is one of my favorite series. But even the Next Gen with Conspiracy and a few of those episodes, The Drumhead, Measure of a Man, some of those in DS9 or in TNG that skewed to that little bit of a darker undercurrent to the Starfleet. I like those storylines. I'm okay with those storylines. I think it's part of why, I know you're more of a Marvel movie fan, whereas I tend to be more of a Batman fan because it is those darker storylines. And so I appreciate that part of it. I kind of like seeing that imperfect version of Starfleet and the Federation that I think makes it a little more real than some of what it appeared at times. I think it got almost comically perfect, if that makes sense. So, those I don't mind. Now the other argument with darkness is, the lighting. And season 1, I think, was worse at it with some of the lighting. And you're right, the laziness of the production value in general in season 1. But, even that, watching this season of it there's been some criticism of the lighting of the sets of the Titan and other things, but we've repeatedly seen in Star Trek movies, and let's be honest, this is a 10-part movie at this point. The production value of it, the scale and scope of it, this is a 10-part movie. It's not been uncommon for us to see the darker lighting on the sets. They did it with the Enterprise D when it went from the small screen into Generations. They did it with the Enterprise A. Look at The Undiscovered Country versus Star Trek V. And, when Nicholas Meyer got in there and it had that darker, grittier feel to the ship, which, honestly, that's my favorite version of the Enterprise, is the Undiscovered Country A.
Yeah, and, when I say dark, you're right. I mean, I think you are a more fan of darker tones than I am. But more what I'm referring to is violence and darkness for the sake of violence and darkness. And one of the ones I'm thinking the most is, did we really need Egypt's eye ripped out? Did we really need that? Was that necessary, or was that just violence for the sheer violence? And if it meant something to the story, sure. But it really didn't. Seven was already on the path she was going to be on. So did we really need that? I'm not even a Voyager fan, and I think that was gratuitous. So stuff like that. But I agree.
And I would agree with you on that.
And I think the tone has definitely changed, and we can for those who haven't checked us out before, Blake and I are still ahead of everybody by 3 episodes. So we have seen the press screeners for episodes 1 through 6. And I think we can safely say that the tone continues. And actually, they just released some promo images for No-Win Scenario. And even those promo images, if you look at them, they're a little lighter. In terms of lighting, literally lighting. And there's a reason for that. And I think other reviewers have said, so I feel comfortable in saying this, I believe that episode 4 has some of the most Star Trek moments that you have seen in a long time. And when I say refer to Star Trek moments, I mean learning something new, exploring. Believe it or not, that's coming. I think like Discovery season 4, when they learn to communicate with the beyond the galaxy aliens and stuff, just something new. And I think we're going to get that in episode 4. Episode 4 to me, in all of the 6 that I saw, was the most TNG of an episode, in my opinion. But I can't say too much because you all haven't seen it yet.
And, another thing to touch on, and then I see Greg has a comment in the chat too, but, we mentioned Stephen Barton's score when he comes into that. And I've seen a little bit of criticism online, and including on one of our group posts, where it was, how to do a score for Star Trek, copy what's been done before. Let's be clear, he didn't copy, what had been done. He used notes from it. He used thematic elements. He used notes from it. He evoked what you got with those older themes, those original themes from Horner, from Goldsmith, and used them in a way that integrated them into this story and into his own score. I think in our interview with him, he mentioned, really thinking that had these composers had the technology, the instruments that we have now, how would they have used that to make those themes now? And so I don't think he copied them, but he definitely paid homage to them. And if you listen to that interview, you get a sense of the care that these folks put into this, that these are fans of Star Trek who are doing this work. They respect what they're working with. They respect the fans who they're making this for. And it shows.
Completely agree. And if you haven't seen Blake Emily's and my interview with Stephen Barton, which we did last week, you really should. The dude is a class A Star Trek nerd, and he was just a fun conversation. I will say, after we stopped the recording, because I wanted to give it, I promised him an hour. I said, we're going to go for an hour, we're going to be done. So I cut off the recording an hour. We stayed on for another half an hour, 45 minutes, just chatting with the dude with the recording stopped. And he was just nerding out on the most amazing stuff. So he's a good guy. And I really do appreciate that he's been able to work with the rest of the team over there to really make this feel like something special. So you mentioned Greg in the chat. Greg says, I really like how Season 3 is bringing plot points from different Star Trek franchises. Shapeshifters from DS9, for example. What are the others? So what are some of the other examples we've seen pulled? Because the one thing I said in our no spoiler review before the show came out was, if you're a fan of TOS, if you're a fan of Enterprise, Voyager, DS9, whatever, there's something in these shows for you. Yeah. And I absolutely was saying with Deep Space Nine, I was referring to the Changelings. I just couldn't say it yet. So...
Well, and I think if you watch, I will say, shout out to Trek Culture, their cetacean observations. Their poor team on the first episode of this, I think we're about to have a breakdown with everything they flagged. Because, I mean, you pull plot points, and even when they start in on Beverly Crusher's ship, the Ilios, and they've got that TNG-style desktop, computer, and it's got the log entries from around Best of Both Worlds. You see the case that Jack Crusher's belongings were in. I mean, there's all of these different pieces, but it's not just gratuitously throwing in bits and pieces from the sets. It's each of these pieces has a meaning. It's there for a reason. You get into Picard when he's sitting in his office at the chateau, and there's the picture off the ready room wall of the Enterprise D, aka the fat one. He's got his Rysican flute. He's got the tapestry that he was given off the back of his chair. These, and it makes sense because, I mean, I look around your office background, Scott, and my own here, where we've got things that are sentimental to us that we have gathered over the years of our careers, over what we've done, our accomplishments. So it would make sense within the story that Picard would have that same thing within the chateau. So these pieces that they bring in have significance, they have reason. It's not just fan service.
Agreed. So a couple things that I have noticed is obviously Deep Space Nine is getting more love in this season than it has in 20 some odd years. But also there's a lot of love to Voyager. And that's partially because both Terry Matalas worked on Voyager, and Stephen Barton during our interview said that he is a big fan of Voyager. So I think that the team over there has a lot of respect for Voyager. And Voyager's seen a resurgence, especially after
that
it
will
was
make
on
Ryan from Yum Yum very happy.
I know. I'm not a big fan of Voyager, but I respect the fact that other people are. They may be wrong, but I respect that they're fans. But, there's been a lot of that. And I think the last thing I'll hit on the Stephen Barton interview, and again, you all should check it out if you haven't, it's on our channel, is he mentioned a scene, which hasn't come yet, where he incorporated 4 or 5 different Trek themes into 90 seconds. That scene's coming, guys. And when it does, I expect the internet to explode. And if the internet doesn't explode, I'm going to be very disappointed in all of you. Because that scene, when it happens, is a love letter to 60 plus years of Trek in 90 seconds. And it is done so well. And it is part of the plot. That's the key thing, too. A lot of people are throwing out the member berries. These aren't. Member berries, nostalgic stuff for nostalgic's sake is, hey, we're going to throw this at you, and it means absolutely nothing. But we're just going to throw it at you because we know you're going to notice it. Everything that they're doing so far is part of the plot. Even the little stuff on Crusher's desk. She was listening to the log entry about right when they encountered the Borg for the first time in Best of Both Worlds. And then she used the code that they used during that mission. All that stuff is there for a reason. And I love that. I love that. So Jim says, I'm enjoying season 3 so far. Much more than the previous seasons. Low bar, I know. It seems like Terry Matalas knows what he's doing. I just hope Picard and company make it out of the nebula soon. Yeah, and to that, Jim, again, we can't spoil what we've seen. But one of the things I did say in our no spoiler review, and I'll say here again, I like the fact that this show does not feel like has filler. The plot moves. So I don't think you have to worry too much. And I'll leave it at that.
Greg has a prediction on the 90 seconds.
He does. I suspect this 90 seconds is when we learn the secrets of the nebula. Biological signs detected. I can't spoil anything, but I think you are perceptive in noticing that there were biological signs detected in the last episode. That's very perceptive. I won't answer the first part, but that's very perceptive. You'll know it when you see it. It's not one of the... It's not one of those, like, the 90 seconds we're referring to is not one of those where it's like, was that it? Was that it? I'm not sure. Was that? No. You'll know when you see it. Trust me. So while we're waiting for everyone else in the chat to ask questions or give predictions or feedback, what other stuff do you want to talk about, Blake? I've got some fan theories I want to hit on and maybe bash and destroy, but what do you got first?
Well, I was kind of looking forward to the destruction of fan theories segment personally.
Okay. Have you heard any really interesting ones? Because I have.
Oh, there have been a few out there. A lot of them have already been kind of shot down, thankfully. And I think we touched a little bit of this in our last review. You know, a lot of them centered around exactly who was Vadic.
Mm-hmm.
And, all sorts of potential ideas out there for who is Vadic, ranging from somehow related to Sela and Tasha Yar somehow being related to someone from Picard's past. There's all these pieces out there that were swirling about who Vadic was that basically came to the same kind of well-trodden revenge plot
Mm-hmm.
type thing, and which is frankly the easy button that has happened in newer Star Trek, i.e., Into Darkness. Um,
Ugh.
so I'm glad they didn't go that route, and we've got something new with Vadic. I think probably the most, I don't want to say the most batshit, but up there on the batshit fan theories is that Jack Crusher is actually Jack Crusher's son, that Beverly harvested the DNA of her dead husband and impregnated herself with it to have another son. Um, that
Yeah.
one, yeah, that one was an
Yeah.
interesting theory.
I mean, it does say a little bit that Beverly decided to name Jean-Luc's son after Jack. Although Jack was a friend of Picard's too. But I think it would say even more if Beverly's like, it's been about 30 years. I've still got some clothes I never laundered in my husband's luggage. I think I could find a couple hairs. I think we can make this work. It's a little interesting. It's a little interesting theory there. So here's my theory, Blake. The one that I have been fighting tooth and nail while also trying not to spoil things on some of the Picard Facebook forums and everything else. Because of what happened in the last few minutes of the last episode, the big fan theory now is that Riker is in fact a changeling. Because Riker was out of character during the scene where he told Picard that Picard had killed them all and he sent him off the bridge. Therefore, Riker is a changeling.
Boy.
Oi. What do you think about that before I go on my rant?
We'll see how close my rant gets to your rant. We'll compare
Please.
notes in a minute. But I disagree. The one thing I've liked with this story is when it is started, these are the characters that we knew from TNG, but they have lived another 20 years. They have had experiences through life, whether that be Riker losing his son, whether having issues in his relationship with Troy and his daughter, you know that those things happen to people who live through those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So the William Riker that we have now isn't the Riker that we left at the end of Nemesis on his way to take command of the Titan. He's lived these experiences. He's commanded his own ship now. He's had crews under him. Picard has, died and been reincarnated into this synthetic body now. Picard has gone through these experiences as well. And we've touched on this, that Picard's very much been a journey of Patrick Stewart himself. And, Picard has reckoned with his own past and his own demons through the first 2 seasons. So these characters have grown from where we last left them, which I think is what makes this a very well-written story. It takes these characters and it moves them in their own stories as well. And so for me, I don't think it was out of character. And we've also seen Riker has stood up to Picard before in alternate Future Imperfect. We saw it at the end of All Good Things where there was animosity there. So I don't think it's necessarily, you look at some of the alternate potential futures that Star Trek showed. Granted, one was a fictional projection with Future Imperfect, but you see that Riker has that potential to tell Picard he's out of line or that he disagrees with him in a forceful way. And I think this is just the prime manifestation of that.
Yeah, the couple arguments I've heard on the flip side. Well, the first one, this is one that was just fun to me, is the person was arguing that because Gene Roddenberry did not want any interpersonal conflict on TNG, and therefore any interpersonal conflict that happens even now, because it's still the TNG characters, is not Roddenberry Trek, is what, quote unquote, what the person said. And therefore, it can't be true. And I pointed out that even in TNG, now, of course, more so when Roddenberry passed away, but even in TNG, you had interpersonal conflict. I mean, hell, how many times did Picard yell at Wesley alone? So yeah. I think TNG fans, specifically, I think older TNG fans, and I don't mean that derogatory. I just if you were an adult when you watched TNG, they're used to that kind of Roddenberry aesthetic that kind of went out the way in the 90s. But if you didn't watch DS9 and you didn't watch Enterprise and some of Voyager, and of course if you haven't watched the new Trek, or you don't like the new Trek, then you're used to kind of the more cookie cutter stuff. Like another person said, well, they should have gone to the ready room and hashed this out. I'm like, they're being shot at. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let's go to the ready room here while we're being shot at and discuss this more proper. But really for me, go ahead.
And you mentioned Roddenberry, and I'm probably going to commit an act of sacrilege here.
Uh-oh.
That red alert might need to get a little bigger.
Uh-oh.
Roddenberry had a vision with Star Trek. And from TOS, he established that vision. He brought it forward with Next Generation. But as Star Trek evolved, as society moved, I think Gene's vision started to have cracks. And I mean, he had some pretty out there futurist ideas that he put into Star Trek. The whole notion of, humanity doesn't have conflict. There's not these major conflicts with each other. I would actually argue that Star Trek was at some of its best when Gene got told, go sit over here with your executive producer title and let someone else kind of take a hand at it. Because arguably, what are some of the better movies of the franchise? They happened Star Trek 2 and beyond, right? And that was after the studios, because Gene threw so many ideas into the motion picture. It just kind of became a convoluted thing. But they took his vision and they evolved it and moved it forward. And I think that's what's bringing in some of the fresh perspectives and blood into the franchise has done. And I think Next Generation suffered from some of that too. And when you got into Deep Space Nine and Voyager, even Enterprise, when you got to bring in some of those more human elements that you could relate to some of these characters, because we've all had that coworker. We were talking before we started. We've all had that coworker that we hate. And no amount of evolved sensibilities is going to make us like that person. So you get to see these characters in almost a more human way, I think, than what maybe Gene originally planned out.
Agreed. And to the actual scene, and the reason why I still think it's not out of character for either one of them, we also got to realize, aside from watching them make pizza in season 1, we haven't seen Riker and Picard together since Nemesis. And even in Nemesis, Riker was still his first officer, Picard's first officer. And after Nemesis, obviously, Riker went off to the Titan and became a captain for many years. So you've got two accomplished captains, not a first officer and a captain, two captains. And one captain is saying, I believe, based on what I'm seeing, we have to take an offensive strategy. We have to fight back because there's no way we can defend ourselves against this. And if we just draw it out, Picard says this, she's just going to pick at us until she can kill us. And Riker, on the other hand, is saying we need to take a defensive strategy because I know the capabilities of this ship and we are not going to win a fight with that thing. So we need to run. I also think, too, Riker has a little bit going on in his current situation where he feels more responsibility on what's going on. Shaw has just given him command of the ship. So now he's not only responsible for his friend Picard, he's responsible for the 500 crew on that ship. Also, we have just heard that not everything is well in the Troy household. So he's trying to get back to his one child who's alive and his wife. And doing a suicide kamikaze run at the Shrike doesn't seem like a very good idea to him. But here's the thing. When all of his strategies don't work, the defensive strategy doesn't work because the Shrike knows where they are because of changelings. He decides, okay, Picard's my mentor. Picard's my father figure. Picard is usually right. He's telling me to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do it even though I think it's wrong. I'm going to do it. And of course it fails. And so Riker not only is upset with himself because he had to go ahead and follow Picard's lead even when he knew it was wrong, but he's also upset with Picard for pushing and pushing and pushing for something he knew Riker didn't want to do, even though Riker is the captain. And so finally Riker did what he had to do and said, just get the hell out of here. Because if not, you're going to continue to push, you're going to continue to question me, and we don't need that right now. I think Riker was completely in the right. However, what I think is interesting and what I love about the writing here, and Terry Matalas kind of confirmed this on Twitter without confirming it, is somebody had posted who was right. And it was a poll, Picard or Riker. And I replied, they were both wrong. That's the point of the story. And Terry Matalas replied back with a kind of Terry type thing, just saying, interesting. So I think that's the whole point here. And of course, Blake, we've seen what happens next, but just based on what we've seen here, I think it's very clear that this conflict is here because these two powerful individuals are both wrong. And that's interesting storytelling. Jim kind of agrees. I really don't think he is a changeling. Jim, thank you for joining Club Not a Changeling. We appreciate it. So that's the one big theory. And of course, there's other theories that spin off of that, like Picard is a changeling for the very same reason. Basically, everyone is now a changeling. It's like, watching Battlestar Galactica 20 years ago. Everyone's a Cylon. Unfortunately, Battlestar Galactica screwed the pooch on that one and made everyone a Cylon, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, so that's where I'm at on that. What else we got, Blake?
So, well, let's see. I've offended the Star Trek fans by commenting on Gene Roddenberry.
You sure have. Good job.
I'll stand by that argument. I mean, he had a great vision, but I think it took some other people to move the vision forward. But let's talk the whole new Trek argument, because that's been another. We have a Reddit theory popping in real quick.
I'll pop that up here in a second. You go with what you're doing, and we'll move into that one.
So let's talk new Trek for a minute, because that's been the other piece. Is, I mentioned our good friend Ryan over at Yum Yum Pod, and he has still adamantly refused to even watch season 3 because of how much he's disliked 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other people who are just firmly entrenched in this new Star Trek ain't my Star Trek, damn it. The problem is we've heard this before. When TNG came out,
yes.
It was, this ain't Star Trek. This isn't who our Star Trek is. So it's funny is the people now who are saying this isn't my Star Trek, your parents were saying this 30 years ago, that this isn't our Star Trek. 40 years ago now almost, wouldn't it?
I know. 36 years ago, I believe is what it is when TNG started.
We did need that reminder. But, and then they did it again when Deep Space Nine came out. This is not our Star Trek.
There are still people that say that, and they are wrong. But yes, you're right.
Yeah, and that argument is still there. So, I don't really get into these arguments over new Star Trek isn't Star Trek. Let's just fundamentally say right now, it is all Star Trek. It is all Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
It is different stories. It is different visions of what Star Trek is or can be or should be. There are series within the franchise I like better than others. But you know what? I'm still going to watch it. And I'm still going to be a fan of it. Because I like this franchise. I like what they've done with it. I will criticize some of the story directions. We've talked at length. Discovery season 1 was a bit rocky. I think there was a lot behind the scenes that contributed to that. But without that, honestly, without the Abrams verse movies, we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are they great films? There were good parts in them. I actually liked Star Trek 2009.
Mm-hmm. I think Beyond's in my top 3
Beyond
Treks.
Was a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and depending on the day, Beyond's in my top 5, top 3 Treks right off the bat.
Yeah. So, there were bits and pieces in there. So this whole idea of what is or isn't Star Trek, I don't get it. I kind of reject that because, again, the people that are making that argument today, their parents were making that argument 30 years ago when TNG started.
Mm-hmm. So here's another Reddit theory, as you alluded to. Greg says, one Reddit theory I read is that Vadic is Moriarty. His holodeck memory cube was stolen from Starfleet headquarters, which we did hear. Something else was stolen from Daystrom. We have the portal tech, but something else was stolen. And then Greg goes on to say That explains the arch nemesis thing he has against Picard. So, Blake, we got to be careful here because we know a little bit more than most. But this is going to be funny. How do you feel about Greg's theory that Vadic is Moriarty?
I think that is an interesting theory.
Do you see the snipers outside your window yet from Paramount? They're lining up.
I do. I see the Paramount Plus helicopter hovering right around over there. I think it's an interesting theory. I actually hadn't seen this one before. But yeah, you're right. They have said something else was stolen from Daystrom. And what that could be, I mean, we've kind of seen some of who the reveal was with the changelings, and who knows what they could use in here. But that would be an interesting one, that if we were dealing with the memory cubes of Moriarty.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I will say, and I said this with our initial review, and I'm not referring to Vadic herself, but one of the things I love about those trailers that have come out so far, specifically the big trailer that came out right before the show started that kind of showed a lot, and even the trailer at San Diego Comic-Con, which showed Moriarty and showed lore. What you saw there is what they wanted you to see. And that's I can't say any more. But in that trailer, what you saw is what they wanted you to see. And you will understand more of that as we get farther into it. You hit on a couple other things with Vadic, and that is, you know, she's Khan's great grandniece, second removed cousin or whatever. She's I heard one person because again they're Voyager fans out there. She is the daughter of Seska, come to get revenge on Seven. I don't even think Seven and Seska ever met.
Now there was another one that was interesting out there, that Vadic is somehow a descendant from Rachel Garrett, the Enterprise sea captain.
Which we did see the Red Lady. Yes.
And that's an interesting, because yeah, with the Red Lady, it's the statue of Rachel Garrett outside of the Starfleet recruitment center that gets portaled into oblivion. So I'm going to be curious to see where that goes, because, you know, they said beforehand that Denise Crosby does not necessarily have a role in this, but there would be something that pays homage to Tasha Yar show up somewhere in this. You know, that was released beforehand. There's no spoiler there. That comment was made.
Yep.
And so I don't think it is a coincidence that it was the statue of Rachel Garrett.
I think so. And I think part of that too is, as we've kind of alluded to a couple times, there is definitely a lot of homages coming and already been seen to storylines in the past. One of the big other theories out there that still may be true, but the Magic 8 Ball saying probably not. And that is, originally the theory out there was it's the conspiracy aliens, that one big dangling thread from TNG season 1 that was never dealt with again, because honestly, they decided to go with the Borg as the big bads instead of the conspiracy bugs. But that was the other big theory out there, is that this is a plan being cooked up by the conspiracy aliens who said they would be coming back, and they are now finally back. Very well still could be. We've got, 7 more episodes to go, but it sounds like that's not where they're going with the changelings. But so there's a lot of stuff out there. I will say the other thing, I said I wasn't going to bring up the interview again, but I'm going to. Stephen Barton said that there's a lot of stuff coming in episodes 7, 8, 9, and 10 that unfortunately Blake and I are not cool enough to know about yet. So I will tell you there's a lot of cool shit coming in 4, 5, and 6. But there's also more cool shit coming that we don't even know about yet. And he would not spill the beans. I tried valiantly to get him.
Very careful. He mentioned those CBS snipers.
He did. He also mentioned some themes that may or may not be coming up. Jim's got another theory here. My only theory that Jack was a Picard clone seems to have been disproven. There's definitely something going on with Jack, though. Right, Jim? I mean, he's got that weird red door, and when he was woken up by Commander Hansen. When he was woken up by Seven, He had like that red. It almost looked like roots of a tree growing on the walls or vines or something. So there's something going on with Jack. We just don't know what it is yet. But according to what Beverly's saying, it was a nice little romp on a shore leave that ended in Jack being conceived. So, eh.
Proof positive that Picard got laid.
Picard does fuck, which we already kind of knew. I mean, he had like that lounge that robe he wore when he was hanging around with what's her face that then got off with Q down the road.
Oh, Vosh, yes.
Vosh, that's it. He has a thing for V's, doesn't he? So this is really hard for Blake and I right now. We're probably going to come back and do this again 3 episodes from now, because then we can actually make our own predictions. Because right now we can't.
Yeah, we can't predict a damn thing.
Because anything we predict, even because like I said, we haven't seen 7, 8, 9, and 10, so we could predict what's going to happen in 7, 8, 9, and 10, but that would be based on stuff that we know that you don't. So those predictions would be bad. But I think what we're getting at here, and what has really excited me throughout these past 3 weeks, is the fandom. And Blake, you've already kind of hit on this. The fandom has come alive again. Say what you will, if you like Discovery, Lower Decks, Prodigy, the other Picards, even Strange New Worlds, I haven't seen the fandom alive like this in a very, very long time. And I'm hopeful. For one, I'm really hopeful for Strange New World Season 2. I think Strange New World Season 1 was great. But I'm hopeful for that. And I'm just hopeful for what's going to come next, because I think when people get what they're looking for, I hope the powers that be are seeing that. Yeah. And seeing that this stuff is working.
So let's take another little trip for a minute, because you mentioned earlier, and we both commented on it, that kind of lazy cut and paste Starfleet from season 1.
Yes.
You and I are both Starship fans. I mean, you've got a nice collection behind you there with some ample nacelles, shall we say.
My Constitution A is up here, but its stand broke. I really need some glue.
So I will say Picard season 2 kind of kicked this off with the ships that they pulled in there, and they pulled in a lot from Star Trek Online for some of those ships, but also Strange New Worlds. And it kicked off with Discovery, and they made some tweaks into Strange New Worlds, but the Strange New Worlds version of the original Constitution class is an absolutely beautiful ship.
Absolutely.
It's just stunningly a beautiful ship. And then you get into Picard season 3, and our main hero ship is the Titan A Neo Constitution class. And I'll admit, when I first saw the previews, I don't know if they refined the CGI a little bit. I wasn't that big of a fan, honestly. I thought it looked a little weird, a little boxy, but
very stocky.
Seeing that ship on screen and maybe it's the nostalgia of it, that space dock scene where Picard and Riker are in the shuttle, and it pans across, and you see, the Titan A sitting there in space dock. And then they do, Stephen Barton talks about the Titan theme as they leave space dock, and you just get that beautiful shot of that ship going out of space dock, pan around space, and to warp it goes. It really is a good design, and it shows evolution within the Starship designs that they've done. And I think they've done a great job with that. And they've brought back in people that get that. They've brought Doug Drexler's been back involved with some of this, with getting ship designs in. They've brought in the teams from Star Trek Online who's done ships. They've got Mike Okuda back doing the Okudagram and the diagrams. So
we'll get to her in a minute. Keep going.
Catherine calling out our
sexy ship talk
about starships.
Ample nacelles and all. No, I completely agree with you on that. And I will say we haven't seen all the ships we're going to see yet. And there's some fun ones in there for sure. Obviously, we do know the Enterprise F is going to make at least a cameo. And we've been told through posters and other side chatter that Frontier Day is coming, which is the anniversary of the launching of the NX-01. That is Frontier Day. There's still some question on how the math works on that, because it's supposed to be the 250th Frontier Day, I believe, but whatever. But that is the launching of the XO1. So, and I think we've seen some shots from the trailer of a whole bunch of starships doing beauty shots. And to your point on the Titan A, I was the same way. I wasn't really sold on the Titan A, but I'll tell you, the one shot that sold me, and we didn't even talk about it in our episode 1 review. Actually, was it episode 2? It was episode 2. We didn't even talk about it. And that is when the Helios is under a tractor beam by the Shrike, and Shaw decides to warp in and break the tractor beam. That is one badass few seconds of starship porn. You got the Shrike and Helios, and then boom, the Titan's there to break the tractor beam. That's when I fell in love with the Titan. And that's also when I fell in love with Captain Shaw. But we'll talk about Captain Shaw in a minute. First, Catherine would like to talk about birth control. So, I have a question about that.
You know nothing about. No.
I have a question about that, too. Would birth control be pretty much foolproof in the future? Or did one or both of them consciously, my God, it's late. Consciously or subconsciously want to have a kid with each other? And then she says, sorry to interrupt the sexy ship discussion for going back to the whole shore leave romp thing. So, why didn't Picard wear a rubber? Blake, let's talk.
I'm kind of speechless on this one. I mean, I never thought we'd be discussing Jean-Luc Picard and his use of condoms.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe, I got nothing. Because you're right. Picard has said over and over again, and Crusher called him out for it. Well, he said in Generations, the Picard line ends with him. And he said that 20 years ago, he didn't want children because of his thoughts and his interactions, his trauma from his own childhood, which we lived out in gory detail in season 2. So it does make sense that Picard would not be trying to have a child. And I don't want to even try to think what Crusher was thinking. So I got nothing.
I mean, about the only thing I can say here is, his shields were down, her shuttle bay was open, and now we've got Jack Crusher.
Is it kind of like the season, the Final Frontier scene where they do a manual entry of the shuttlecraft?
Yes.
With the really bad special effects, because Industrial Light and Magic was doing another film at the time.
Oh, that was a bad landing.
That was a bad movie and a bad landing.
It was a bad movie.
Still better than Into Darkness, though. So, Blake, let us talk real quick about my favorite thing to come out of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And I just found this on Twitter, and I had to steal it. Oop, it's a little big. Hold on. I'm sorry. Bear with me. I will make this fit.
Catherine is now sorry she asked, by the way.
You're welcome for the nightmare fuel. I'm going to learn OBS, folks, where I can figure out how to do this so it doesn't look like bad, but oh my goodness. Everyone's laughing at me now. Like, how have you not figured this out? There we go. Captain Shaw. Star Trek. More weird shit. That's all I have. So, a lot of people have been talking about how Captain Shaw is a pain in the ass. And my response to that is, yes, he is. And he's awesome. So tell me, Blake, I know you had different thoughts of Captain Shaw to begin with, so tell me a little bit about Captain Shaw.
So yeah, to start with, I think my thoughts were a lot like several of the people who have reviewed it so far and were watching, that Captain Shaw was, I think I sent you and said he's kind of a dick, actually.
He is.
And this is another one of those moments where I'm watching the CBS snipers out the window. He had that attitude with the dead naming 7, the way he was with Picard and Riker. Although I did love the comment as he was going through the things that were not going to happen on the mission. And it was, we're not going to crash the starship intentionally or unintentionally. Considering the 2 times they put Deanna Troi at the helm, the Enterprise did not fare that well.
I would argue one was actually Geordi's fault. Deanna was just collateral damage on that one, but sure.
I will grant you that one. One might have been Geordi's fault when the warp core blew up and they crashed the D.
And the second one, she was following Picard's orders.
just the 2 times she gets in the driver's seat, the thing crashes into something. So, but yeah, Shaw had a thing. But again, it goes back to that, and I think I can say this relatively spoiler free. Is the one thing I've liked with new Trek is you see growth and development in the characters. If you go back to TNG, every week, for the most part, they hit that reset button, right? What happened at the end of the week ends. I think the little bit we saw was after Best of Both Worlds, we saw a little bit bleed over into the episode Family. But pretty much for the rest of TNG, you didn't get any of the fallout of Picard's experiences of trauma as Locutus. And it really wasn't until Emissary where you had Sisko react with such hostility to Picard for what happened. So the one thing I like, they've picked that up definitely within the newer Trek series. And I think there will be, you will learn more about Captain Shaw.
And if you're watching the end credits, you may know more about Captain Shaw than most. Those end credits, to your point, Trek Culture did a really good job with their citation observations the past few episodes. The end credits give you a lot of info. But here's my thing with Captain Shaw. Yes, I completely agree that how he is treating Seven is extremely out of line. I will not defend him on that one at all. But again, as you pointed out, we're going to learn more about Shaw. But everything else he has done, honestly, I will defend him. He did not show up when Picard and Riker showed up on the shuttle to do their inspection because honestly, he just didn't give a shit. He doesn't see these guys as legends like everyone else based on stuff we'll learn later. So there's that. He also is very, very cognizant of the fact that these guys are not telling him the truth. We see that in the dinner scene where Picard says they're going to Deep Space 11 and Deep Space 11 hasn't even been operational for years. It's very clear to him right off the bat that this is bullshit and something's going on. So everything that Shaw does in terms of interaction with Picard and Riker, even sticking him in the bunk beds, which was funny,
yeah,
I'll defend him on. And where I think he shows his ability to be a captain, going back to that scene I already mentioned, he is willing to do a lot to protect his crew. And he, as he points out, he is outside of Federation jurisdiction. He has no help coming. So he has this one guy who already is a criminal, wanted in many planets and has different names and whatever. That is a problem. And he is going to have to deal with that. He even takes the full hour. He tries to figure out what the hell to do. But at the end of the hour, he's going to give this guy up until he finds out who he actually is. And that's when he decides to do what he needs to do. And also Picard actually says Admiral's orders. And so he does what he has to do because the Admiral has told him he has an order to follow. But all of that is good captaining. It's not what we're used to. It's not the captaining we're used to. But it doesn't mean he's not a good captain. And then he's very intelligent, emotionally intelligent. When he gets hurt and gets taken out, immediately he transfers command. Because he understands he cannot continue to be in command of the ship when he is bleeding internally. So I like everything that we've seen of Shaw except for the 7-piece. Again, that's completely on its own. And what we see coming up, we'll see how I feel about Shaw, and I'll say how I feel about Shaw after we have some more episodes. But right now, I am enjoying the hell out of Shaw. And one of the reasons why I'm enjoying the hell out of Shaw is the actor playing him, Todd Stashwick, plays an asshole to a T. And I have been talking this show up because I just blew through it. If you haven't watched 12 Monkeys, you need to watch 12 Monkeys just for Deacon, who is played by Todd Stashwick. That character is in the pantheon of assholes in sci-fi. And it is just... He's amazing. You should just watch 12 Monkeys just for Deacon. You will not be sorry, I promise. So yeah, that's my Shaw moment. So I think we're coming up on the hour here, Blake. Is there anything you want to say before we end up? And then if anyone in the chat watching still has any predictions or any thoughts, you can throw in there too. We'll talk about those for a few moments. But Blake, what do you have to chat about before we head out the door?
I just think my big thing, and it's what I've been encouraging all along, is give this show a chance. This has been, I think I called it the biggest budget fan film I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people who are involved in this are fans themselves. You've got Terry Matalas, who has a deep love and respect and history with the franchise. You've got a composer who is a fan of the franchise and those who have done the work before him. You've got all of these creatives that they brought in. You know, we mentioned Doug Drexler, Mike Okuda. These are people who have created the visuals of Star Trek that we have come to know and appreciate. Check this out. The work and care that has gone into this, I definitely think if people give it a chance, they'll be impressed with it and will like this. You know, we've commented before, this is the undiscovered country that the TNG team never got. And it really is starting to feel like that. The other piece I'll just say on a feel of it, you know, I'm a big fan of Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. And part of it is you've almost got with the Enterprise and Reliant, because I also love the movie Hunt for Red October. And you've almost got that very submarine, you know, feel with the Enterprise going after the Reliant and the Mutara Nebula. And then you get to this, and you've got the Shrike and the Titan and the Nebula. You've got the sensors that are down. I mean, I love that when Shaw's like, go look out the back window and tell me if it's coming.
That's a smart captain move.
You know, but the feel of it, it's got that same feel and style of that Star Trek II, you know, Mutara Nebula, yes, with the Enterprise and the Reliant, but it's not repetitive of it.
Yes, key
it
point.
It invokes it. It's got the feel of it, but it's not repetitive. You don't feel like you're sitting there going, God damn, I've watched this already.
I will see your Hunt for October, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I will raise you Crimson Tide. Because the interactions with the command crew, I think, really is a Crimson Tide piece as well, too.
You're right. And Crimson Tide is another great movie.
I'm going to bring up Greg's chat. And, Blake, we got to put on our poker faces here. You ready for this?
Yep.
Prediction. An important character fans know and love will sacrifice themselves to save the day. Okay, moving on. Anything else we want to talk about? Because I don't want to get in trouble on even alluding to anything that could or may not come up. Also, Greg says, thanks for doing this, both of you. Very fun. Thanks, Greg. We really appreciate the interaction. I think we're going to start doing more of these, especially now that I can do more interaction. I'm learning as I go. Blake, since we are a Babylon 5 podcast, as we've been chatting here, the one thought I had, and here's Greg's response to that. The one thought I had was, what if we did a live Beyond the Rim Babylon 5 podcast, but it's not about Babylon 5 spoilers. It's about talking about our newbies and saying what we feel about their predictions and their questions with the community who's seen what the show is. I think that'd be fun.
Oh, that could be fun.
Let's Beyond the Rim live. Let's talk about the newbies.
Although we might want to be careful how we hashtag that one, because that could go so wrong in so many ways.
Beyond the Rim.
Especially after our discussion about shuttle bays and docking procedures.
Beyond the newbies' rims? I don't know what's going on here. I don't know. But yeah, no, Greg, all joking aside, I think it's very, very clear what's going on here, and we're not there yet. I said this to Steven when we were interviewing him, and actually, I think I said this to him actually when we were off recording, because I was trying to get him to spill the beans on me. But and Blake, you mentioned I'm a Marvel fan. I alluded to what Marvel did in the Infinity Saga. Okay. I said on a Front Row podcast thing about, it was right after Avengers Infinity War came out. So we hadn't seen Endgame yet. And a lot of the podcasters I was with was like, oh, I don't think this person's coming back. I don't think that person's coming back. This person's going to stay dead, blah, 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 blah. And I said, here's my theory. On Kevin Feige, who is the executive producer and runner of Marvel Studios, on Kevin Feige's wall is a splash painting of all of the Avengers together and I'm visualizing the actual picture because I had it on a notebook in high school. All the Avengers together, and that's what he's building to. That's what he's building to. And I was right. A year later, we got that amazing scene in Avengers Endgame that will just go down in history as one of the coolest comic book scenes ever.
I get chills when that scene
I cried.
starts and you hear the radio crackle in. And then,
Sam.
Yeah.
Oh, on your left.
And then the portals open and here they come.
I was sitting next to Jeremy Geckner, who is on the Front Row Network when we were watching it, and we were in a... also, too, that theater experience will never be done again. I don't think I'll ever be in a theater. It's like watching Star Wars for the first time. So, Thor's down for the count. He's about ready to get stabbed, and then the hammer gets picked up, and I smacked Jeremy on the arm. I was like, here it comes. And then the next thing, too, when Sam comes over the radio, I was like, I fucking told you! Poor guy got a bruise on his arm. But to my point, I think Terry Metalis has a picture on his wall, and it is the bridge crew on the bridge. And that's what he's building towards. Now, I don't know what bridge that's going to be. A lot of people are saying we're going to see the Enterprise D again. A lot of people are saying the Enterprise E, we don't know where that is. A lot of people are saying we know the Enterprise F is coming. Hell, it could be the Enterprise G. But I think at the end of the day, one way, shape, or form, when we get to that episode 9 and 10, and again, I haven't seen episode 7, 8, 9, or 10. When we get to episode 9 and 10, we will have our original bridge crew on a bridge of an Enterprise. That's my prediction. That's my theory. And to Greg's point, I don't know what happens after that. But I certainly hope that we don't end on a downer. That's just my hope. I think I want to have a second star on the right and straight on to morning moment. That's what I want. I want at the end, much like we had at the end of season 1 where Picard says engage with his new crew, the La Sirena. I want to have a moment at the very end where Picard says, let's go do one more thing. And the screen fades and we hear the bombastic Jerry Goldsmith music one last time. And I wouldn't doubt at all, even though Avengers Endgame actually copied it already, I wouldn't doubt at all if you have an undiscovered country ending where Patrick Stewart and everyone else sign their names. And that's where we go. And then, of course, we may get a Worf spinoff and a 7 of 9 spinoff, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, that's even if it's part of the crew, you could emulate that. You've got Sulu on the Excelsior, and and he just that ship flies off with Sulu, which could have been a continue. You could very easily have that same.
George Takei should have gotten his Sulu series, but that's a whole nother story. Michael Dorn should have got his Worf series 10 years ago. That's a whole nother story. But that's what I'm hoping for. And again, I don't know if that's going to happen. I haven't seen the end. Terry Metalis, I will be good. I promise. You can see. I don't spoil stuff. So just send me the freaking files. Let me see it. But that's what I'm hopeful for. And then we end on that note that we should have ended on at the end of Nemesis, and we just didn't get. But we'll see. We had another 7 weeks to find out. And hopefully in 3 weeks, Blake and I can actually talk about everything that we've seen so far, and we can actually give our own predictions, aside from what I just did. But Blake, do you have anything else you want to end with before we wrap it up?
I think that covers it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening and interacting with these comments. Well, as Scott mentioned, we're going to be back probably another 3 episodes. When we wrap up episode 6, we can come back on and have another little discussion on where we are with 1 through 6 at that point.
Hear, hear. And until then, you can check out our other shows. We'll be releasing our normal Wednesday Babylon 5 podcast, which will drop Wednesday here on YouTube and also on our podcast app. If you want to listen to the audio, all the links are down below. You can join the conversation on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And then if you want to go one step farther, we do have our Patreon, and you can actually see our producers or the members of our Grey Council down below. It's very special thanks to our producers who keep this show going, and you can join in with them. At any level on the Patreon, you do get access to our Discord channel, which also includes access to a Beyond the Rim spoiler section for Babylon 5, where you can chat with us first ones about all the newbie predictions that they make that are always so much fun. And Jim, thanks for joining us and being with us the whole time. It was fun to have you guys. If you haven't yet, be sure to click that bell icon so you know whenever we go live. We'll be doing it a lot more. I think Blake and I have almost figured this stuff out. So we're going to keep going.
You forgot to mention our other two shows, though, Scott. Thursday morning, we will be doing our review of Star Trek Picard Episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be doing that as a live on Thursday morning. So you can come watch that with us. I believe we do that about 7 a.m. Pacific time. We are one of the earlier releases out there to do our discussion of that. So if you want to get your coffee, your bagel, your whatever, and join us early in the morning, we can discuss Episode 4. And then later on Thursday, I believe we are releasing, or are we doing that on Friday now?
I think they're Fridays, but go for it.
We're doing on Fridays. We have a group of our podcasters doing The Last of Us as they watch through the show Last of Us. So make sure to check out their show on Fridays. And then we've got B5 Wednesdays and Picard on Thursdays. So we've got 3 days worth of content for you each and every week.
Whether you like it or not, it's coming your way. So until next time when we chat about something, I've been Scott, and with me has been
Blake.
And we will talk to you soon. And I think I'll end it with second star to the right and straight on till morning.